Do it.
Yeah.
So, welcome everybody. I've just said to our latest guest, Steve Cook, that we always start the podcast before the podcast. So, welcome everybody. This is Being Human Hidden Depths. And my goodness, I am thrilled today to welcome Mr. Stephen Cook, who has more hidden depths than you'd like to shake a stick at. Welcome, Steve. Lovely to have you on the show.
Hi, Jill. Good to see you. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Now I've got you in the chair. I'm just thrilled. I just know already that our usual hour slot is going to zip away in no time whatsoever, because there are so many facets to who you are. But what you've just told me, I want to tell everybody because it will resonate with so many people. Part of this podcast is about helping people to see and uncover and discover their hidden depths. Everybody thinks I'm just normal. I'm not, I'm nothing special. I mean, there are obviously the odd narcissist out there that do think there's something special, but your average Joe doesn't think they're anything special. And then you start peeling away the layers and they're extraordinary. They're amazing. They're like, wow, you did that. You're incredible. Now, anybody could have done that. I don't think so. And you have just confirmed to me what I've felt for a long, long time, is that there's two of me, and you've just said that there have been two Steves. There's the Steve that had to be pushed out there and did your thing and was on the stage and you were larger than life and you had a mission. And there was the Steve that was like, go away, leave me alone. I don't need any of this. I just want to be alone. And I've been there. And I imagine many, many of our guests will have been there as well. We know how to push ourselves out into that space, but 99.9% of the time, we don't want to do that. And here's a question for you, just off the bat. A lot of people talk about left brain and right brain, extrovert, introvert. What are your thoughts around that? Because I believe that there's the omnivert. Obviously, that's the other one that everyone kind of creates. But I think it's a bit of a fallacy that there's extrovert and introvert. It's just part of the facets of a personality, and we're all a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember years ago having a Myers-Briggs evaluation that had me sort of off the map on extrovert. I was 100% emotional, 100% of everything.
Wow.
And of course, all the introverts came out of their assessments going, "Oh no, I'm an introvert. Oh, that means I'm no fun down the pub." And of course, it couldn't be further from the truth. That's not really the point. And so, I think we're all capable of being extroverts and introverts, probably simultaneously, certainly multiple times in any day. And depending on the situations, we all choose to retreat or step forward or move sideways multiple times. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think there's the introvert, extrovert, left brain, right brain bits. I'm nonlinear, so I've got a brain that's all over the place anyway. And many people will tell you I've got no brain. But other than that, so I don't know. I mean, I've often wondered about things like creativity. I've known plenty of people who said I'm not creative.
Yes.
And or I don't. To your earlier point, I haven't done anything interesting or extraordinary, and I don't believe that for a moment. I think everybody's capable of being creative. I think everybody started out being creative. We were all very young children once and capable of drawing things in sand and building things out of Lego, and then various systems and things beat all these things out of us, the curious and creative mind. So I think it's in us all. It's more a question for me of how far it's been buried, and what caused it.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? That there are so many people that are the people pleasers and the conformists. And what I love about what you're doing is it's the total opposite. I mean, you're launching a fabulous website soon called the Undaunted. Do you want to explain a little bit around what that is? Because it is the kind of antithesis of what is out there at the moment, and that's what is so exciting about it. There is an energy about what you're doing, but at the very least, you just look at the website. I had a little sneak peek, thank you very much, and it's energy coming off of the screen. It's just fantastic. So describe the Undaunted to people so they've got an idea of what you're about.
I think the Undaunted is the encapsulation, really, of a lot of years' work by myself and a whole load of other people. And it's been through various iterations. So I started something called Unstitution. in 2015, which kind of speaks for itself. And we spend a lot of time with institutions, and that's hilarious because we're an institution. But we also started something called the Unheard, and the Unheard is really there to represent and to encourage the voiceless to have voice one way or another. And we do that around the world in all sorts of different environments, which we can maybe go into a bit later. And so the Unheard has a lot of mechanisms around it, around sensitivities about people that don't believe they have a voice, that have never thought to exercise a voice, that have been too beaten down to want to express themselves and things like that, and how those things come out from people when they're really encouraged for those things to happen. And then into how we look at people's stories. We talk about the story of a life and the life of a story. And these things are really important to us, or people's living and livable experiences. And so how do we look at all of those stories? How do we analyze them? How do we understand patterns and links? And the Undaunted is a natural development, really, of both institution and its given role in the world, which is to bring people into social impact collaborations from across society. The Unheard representing the voiceless. And the Undaunted brings all that together to say, okay, if these are the things that we're learning, if these are things we're understanding about people and about society and about systems, and we're all systemic thinkers in the Undaunted, and how these things move together, how can we do something to bring people to a point of understanding their own agency? It's an often used word, rarely truly evokes. And how can they participate in society and social change? And so the Undaunted is on one level, a strategy practice, but where we talk about grand strategy, so looking across social systems rather than within any one system. It is part and expression of people and people's lives, and it has a huge functionality around it, around research and so on. But at the end of the day, and I hope I can say this on your podcast, we are devoted to several things. One of them is dancing with monsters, and the main one is the great unfuck. And that is the Undaunted. We are all daunted people. We've all been daunted profoundly over time. We're all nonlinear thinkers for various reasons. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That makes me neurodivergent. Other people are neurodivergent in different ways. And we have come together to say, enough now. You know, there's that old line from the film Network, I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore. And he goes and stands in the street. And our view would be, that's a good start point, but it doesn't take us anywhere apart from a momentary sort of feel-good factor. And so the Undaunted is that. The Undaunted is just about to go out to the world. We have various things that we're building, Undaunted Minds, we have stories, we're making films, so creative expressions. We are providing all sorts of advisory into serious areas of business and government and so on. We build policy, changing capability and so on. So, yeah, and we want to have fun. We talk about joy as an act of resilience. We live in a very serious world. We're engaged in very serious work, involving the intimacy of individual people's lives right the way through to sort of meta systems one way or another, whole systems thinking. But we want to have some fun and be fun as we go through that. The Undaunted. We're undaunted.
Oh, it's just amazing. I mean, I was very lucky to be introduced to you by one of our members, Ricardo Sai. And I think he saw that the connection, although we are very different people. I think I'm a conformist, your background, you know, originally a punk. I wouldn't have dreamt of being that different in my youth, in my teenage years. So you've kind of, do you feel like you're on a pathway that has been laid out for you? Do you feel this is your place to be and this is the reason why you're here? And what's your ultimate dream with it? What you know, on your deathbed and you look back, what will you have achieved with the Undaunted?
So we already in the last couple of weeks have created a situation where a 14-year-old boy refused to pick up a gun and become a gang member in a favela in Brazil.
Wow.
That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
You know, we did that. On the other hand, we're also advising, informing on whole systems change across businesses. Yeah. And that's good enough for me too. You know, so at the end of the day, if we're able to make a little, was it Steve Jobs who talks about the dent in the universe, then that collectively is what we're about. What we're really about, as I mentioned earlier, is or another way of saying the great unfuck would be to say system empowered impacts in society. You know, we are about the ordinary person, the messy human, who can actually go to bed one night feeling beaten down by the world and wake up the following morning and go, okay, I'm going to do something about this. You know, one of the really big action groups that we have started, we've got a number of them, is focused on social entrepreneurship. You know, we hold with the view that there are 8 billion social entrepreneurs on planet Earth. It's just that most of them don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And how do we deal?
I was just going to say, on that note, remind me to introduce you to Anne Scotland, if you haven't already spoken to her. She is one of our members, and she supports social entrepreneurs, and she's coined socialpreneur in as much as she coaches and supports these people. So, for example, one of the people in her community was a sex slave when she was younger, and she's now developed a business, and she is in property, but all the profits from the property go to support and help other current sex slaves and get them free. And it's that kind of, like, it blows my mind when you think somebody is dedicating their life to supporting people like that, because it's like, it's all very well having an idea and going, well, I've been through that, so I'm going to make sure nobody else goes through that, but they don't know how to manifest that and get it out there. So someone like Anne Scotland, who's, you know, decides she's been through some interesting times. You want a good story, you can listen to Anne or listen to the podcast that Anne was on. She has an amazing story to tell, and I won't tell it. It's her story to tell. But what she has been through, you can see why her purpose and her dream now is about social entrepreneurship and helping and supporting as many of those people as possible. Yeah. I'm just realizing, Steve, how many people I need to introduce you to, because another one is Tess Laurie. Have you come across Tess?
Yeah.
She's amazing as well. And Simon Anholt, he did a TED talk about the Good Country Index and how countries measure their success currently through their GDP. And he says, what about if we measure their success through how good they are to their citizens? Not rocket science,
completely agree, Jill. And by the way, I've had some wonderful conversations with Anne, and we're going to be co-creating a TV show together around social entrepreneurship. Yeah, MasterChef meets Dragons Den meets young people. So, I mean, on that on the subjects of social entrepreneurship, during 2021. We were involved in a great deal of work to bring lots of different separate initiatives together to join forces really around COP26, which was in Glasgow in that year. And one of the things that we did was create a thing called the Earthbeat Film Challenge. And the Earthbeat Film Challenge invited children around the world to make films about their experiences of climate change. We had about 400,000 films from around the world. It was amazing, absolutely incredible. And we then managed to get 3 solar-powered bikes through another initiative. We didn't start the initiative, but we brought the initiatives together. And that was to ride 3 solar-powered bikes, purpose-built, across Northwest Europe, through Germany and France and into Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and then through the UK from the south up to Glasgow. And we decided that we would put video screens on each of these bikes so that we could showcase the films that had been made by children around the world. And one of the bikes stopped. We did a bit of guerrilla activity, and we stopped outside the London Transport Museum in Covent Garden as part of the journey with one of these bikes. We'd been at university campuses and things all around Europe. And we stopped outside thinking that we'd last about an hour before we got kicked out. And instead, the wonderful people at the London Transport Museum said, come on in, be an exhibit for a week. And it was in the middle of the school holidays, late summer in 21. Anyway, the upshot was that one of the films that was being shown on this bike in Covent Garden in central London had been made by a 10-year-old girl from a village, from a school in a village in Ghana. And so we organised that she would have a live feed so that she could see her film being shown on a bike in the middle of this place called London, Covent Garden. And we then organised for one of the bikes to travel to her school. And so we had about 20 young girls in a school in Ghana around this particular bike. And I'm fairly convinced that we ended up with about 20, 10, 11-year-old girls who immediately became social entrepreneurs.
Yes.
The realization they could have an effect, they could actually do something,
Mm.
became incredibly powerful. And so, you know, these stories are everywhere. As you know, I've been recently involved in a lot of work in Afghanistan.
Mm.
You start to understand really difficult areas about women's empowerment and how to start farms, how to grow produce and got some wonderful stories around that. And what happens when you're able to engineer the situation and change a lot of the systemic thinking in a particular area, that allows that person to then get a license to start a restaurant, to make meals out of the food grown on her new farm. And you sort of look at these things and how everybody in that particular local community, the part of Afghanistan, was then able to contribute to and gain from. So it's about local economics and so on. But I've recently found myself saying to a lot of people that we should reframe profits. As an aside, by the way, it's sort of left
Yes,
field.
no, I'm with you. Go on, tell your version.
So the idea of reframing profit, because everybody can profit, everybody can gain value from contribution, and that may not be financial. Is, you know, I hold with a view that says too many businesses are still very much putting profit above all other things, and that's fine. No one's ever going to accuse me of not wanting people to become successful in business. But there are the ways you go about that and the things you do, and these things are often spoken about. But I feel that sometimes profits, because of its alignment with financial capitals rather than any other of the multi-capitals, and there are many of them, starts to it just hijacks everything. So we can say you can be a hugely successful business, you can make massive amounts of profit, but not all of that has to be financial. And that, in a way, is a route into social entrepreneurial thinking, one way or another. I mean, I have said, and I don't know if you want to edit out the swear words from this. Sometimes I am,
No, it's fine.
But I've also said recently that we should reintroduce shareholder value. Shareholder, that's something that, you know, everybody talks about stakeholders now, multi-stakeholder capacities and things like that. But if we start talking about shareholders, but we put a word in front of the word shareholder, and for me that word would be citizen. If we think about citizen shareholders, you know, we are all shareholders in society and in the constituent parts of society. So what are we going to do about that? You know, how are we going to engineer a situation where people can profit from being shareholders in society?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, this is the thing that Simon Anholt was talking about with the measuring countries' success, whatever success is, by the GDP, as opposed to how good they were to their citizens, or how good they were to their visitors, or how good they were to the people that ran businesses in their country. And it was like, just look at different ways of measuring success, or, as you say, profit. And I think we have been sidetracked by the definition of what success is, and we have been taught to be consumers. And for me, capitalism in its original intent isn't working anymore, and it has morphed into something else. And too few people have too much wealth, and too many people have nothing at all. And in anyone's book, that's just not balanced up. So that's one of the things that I say at Collaboration Global. You know, there is enough out there for everybody. We don't have necessarily a shortage of anything. We have a redistribution problem. And the only way that we can solve all of the world's problems, from humanity's problems to the physical world that we live on and the animals that we share it with and all the creatures we share it with, we have to understand that all the solutions are out there. It's not difficult, but there's a blockage in the way. And the blockage is that people aren't willing to collaborate, because of the few are quite happy with the status quo, and we have to make sure that the majority get access to some of the solutions that are out there. And we don't have to self-combust. You know, we don't have to wait until climate change. Everyone goes, oh yeah, it was climate change, wasn't it? That's interesting. We don't have to wait for proof positive that this thing or that thing's happened. It's just about being kind and good to the people around us and to the planet around us, and not destroying the beauty that we have, that we've been blessed with. So yeah, to reframe profit, I am with you every step of the way. That's a really simple, so simple, but imagine if a government took that on board.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you are right about all sorts of things around capitalism, and you know, the perennial problem, or one of the perennial problems, of course, is the short-termism of everything. when people leadership, and we could get into big conversations around leadership and the temporary leader and how that works and things like that. But my feeling around things like profit and shareholder value exchange and learning exchange are two very big parts of the work that we do. One way or another is the undaunted, and how do we start building those systems in order to create exactly what you just said, that greater share of value across all sorts of parts of society and people in it. But at the end of the day, the stakes are too low for most leaders who are in a very short-term role. Could be the CEO of a business, certainly people in Western, democratic governments. And I did a thing recently, there happened to be some leaders of countries involved, and I made the point that I said I would like to read out 4 dictionary definitions of one thing. And I invited everybody in the room to tell me what that one thing was. So I read out the first dictionary definition. Everybody sort of looks a bit clueless and didn't really understand. And so I read out the second dictionary definition, and same thing. Third one, same thing. Fourth one, same thing. And I made the point that I'd given them 4 definitions of the word democracy. And I made the point that I don't actually believe there's ever actually been democracy. So I invited the group to think about how to create the world's first democracy. What would that really look like? Now, it was just in conversation. It was just a part of the thing. But I think that capitalism and many other systems, what triggered those things, what invented those things, go back 400 or 500 years. Look at, as many people, including the wonderful John Alexander, will talk about, the citizen age, and I agree entirely, the citizen age has only just started. We go through the subject age and the consumer age and so it's only now. I actually don't think the citizen age started until COVID did. I think that was the moment that the citizen age actually started. And I think you could probably write future historians will talk about that moment for all sorts of reasons. But
that's like the great realization, isn't it? That, we can pinpoint that. It's like everyone's kind of gone, so you're limited to your house. You can't go anywhere. You're stuck in your flat, or you're stuck in your palace, wherever you are. And what are you missing? Whether you've got all the money in the world or no money at all, you're missing your family and you're missing your friends. Yeah. And it's like, as you say, it's this kind of realization, this everyone is on this planet sharing the same air, the same food, the same opportunities, the same relationships. And it doesn't matter whether they are black or white. We're wasting our time on all that stuff, whether they're gay or straight. It doesn't matter whether they are short or tall or fat or thin or old or young. Who cares if Joe Biden is 80, if he's doing a good job? That number that is attached to him that people criticize him about is irrelevant. It's take the labels away and come together and celebrate the differences, celebrate the cultures, celebrate the experiences, celebrate the knowledge that we all bring. Somebody brings a tiny bit of knowledge that could be the key to something amazing. And I think you're right about this age. There is a space for this great realization. And COVID did it when we sat at home in lockdown and we kind of went, I kind of know what's important in my life now.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that was a really critical moment. I mean, another little story from me at the beginning of COVID, and I won't name names, but we were and still are working with a wonderful, wonderful charity in the UK. We work all over the world, but we're working with this particular charity in the UK. And they are in food distribution. They do incredible work. They always have been around for about 25 years, doing incredible work. And they focus on bringing young people out of young offenders institutes and prisons and into employment in food distribution. At the beginning of COVID, there was a massive need, obviously, for them to upscale and to change quite a lot of their work in terms of distributing food to people, because so many vulnerable people were in lockdown at that time. And they managed to pivot some really quite big and involved processes in about 24 hours. And they did it off an idea from a 17-year-old boy who 3 months earlier was in a young offenders institute for burglary. And the CEO of this particular charity, I remember him saying to me in 2021, we've realized that although we're in food distribution, what we're really doing is giving young people agency. And then he hit me with something which still blows me away. He said, the thing is, we've enable them to believe they have and see that they have agency, but we're not able to talk to them about what they can do with that agency now they've got it. And that was really eating this CEO up, because what do we do now? And of course, we're involved in tons of conversations around education. I prefer to talk about learning rather than education, and I prefer to talk about learning exchanges rather than education systems. But when we think about, even if we were able just in the UK to change the way that young people are learning about themselves, about the world, critical thinking, curious minds, all this good stuff that gets, as we all know, beaten out of us at school, one way or another. Even if we could change all of that, we would then be inviting young people into a world where they would hit a brick wall. So we believe very much that if you're going to change any one thing, you kind of have to change everything. Everything's interconnected, everything's interdependent. And so if you start with a child, and then you think about the world that child could very well end up in, and how the barriers to that child's development through adulthood, it's why we talk about living and livable experience. For many of us, me included, there's not a lot we can do about my lived experience. There's something I can do about my living experience, and I can do anything about my livable experience. Is it a question of will? Is it a question of just turning around and putting your shoulder to it, hard work? Is it a question of making a big noise and swearing a lot? We're all different. We will have different ways. But at the end of the day, the hidden depths of being human, to your earlier points in this discussion, the things that people have done, which they didn't think in any way, shape or form were extraordinary or mattered, but are to somebody else, it is profound. I was invited in 2020 to open Men's Health Day, International Men's Health Day, Men's Day. And I asked the people beforehand, I was thinking about it, what can I talk about? And I thought, I haven't got anything to say. There's nothing extraordinary about me in any way, shape or form. And I suddenly realized that's the point.
Yes.
I'm just an ordinary bloke in a hat. Well, that's extraordinary, isn't it? If you can go through life just being ordinary, and that we all have our stories to tell, no matter how ordinary they might be. And the reality, again, as you said, and as that 17-year-old boy in the UK at the beginning of COVID proved, you can have an idea. But what allows you to think that you can have an idea? You spend enough time in workshops with C-suite in business, or workshops across different parts of silos in business, and you start to wonder whether anybody can really think creatively. Do you need to set up separate functions, innovation functions and things like that? What happens in government? Where are the hypothesis builders? Where are the testers? And it's hilarious how I very recently have really understood my neurodivergence and how that works. And for years I was writing about the mavericks and how the lunatics should take over the asylum. And I think that's right. The creative thinkers. I was asked recently in a panel discussion along with a group of other people we were asked for our definitions in 1, 2 or 3 words of the word creativity. And I have often stated that I've spent 40 plus years as a creative without actually knowing what the word means. Got no idea. And I managed to be a professional creative and strategist for all that time. And so it got to various people were saying, oh, it's problem solving. That's the definition. It was this and that. And it got to me, and I said, I can sum it up in one word. Creativity is desperation.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be done.
Yeah.
It has to be. It's almost pathological. It's got to be done. And I think in a way, if creativity is desperation, then almost all of us are being creative almost every minute of every day, because we're all desperate about something.
Yeah.
And that roots back into social entrepreneurship. It roots into fixing meta challenges in the world, or the poly crisis, whatever that is.
As you were saying all of that, Steve, it just struck me that if you're in the corporate world and you want somebody to innovate and you want somebody to be creative, it's like, right, you 10 over there, you go and get into that room over there and go be creative. And you're kind of sitting there going, there is no desperation in that situation. How are they going to be creative? It's like, don't think of a pink elephant. And you're thinking of a pink elephant. And it's like, what? So it's like, go be creative. It's the last thing that is going to, come out of a font of knowledge, of inspiration. It's just, you can't go and sit in a room and be creative. It just, it happens when it happens. And I think desperation is like the crux. I love that. Absolutely. So a classic small person example around this is that 4 days a week, I write a post for LinkedIn. And I know other people that write it during the day and they schedule it and it goes out at 7 o'clock in the morning the following day. I write it at about 6:30 in the morning and it goes out about 7:15. And it's like, because I know I've got to get it out at 7:15 because I've got other stuff to do, it just comes and I read it back later and go, wow, did I write that? That's quite good. I'm quite pleased with that. But it's this kind of not putting myself on the spot, but it's just the logistics of when I need to get stuff out, the inspiration and the creativity will come. So I've written that down. Creativity is desperation. That is just perfect. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it kind of cuts to the world of artists. We all think about Van Gogh and, lots of reasons why he was the way he was. But, we think about artists, we think about filmmakers, we think about, I was blessed to spend time with Stanley Kubrick and that sort of desire, people in the punk movement, that desire to do things. But at the end of the day, you're right, you can't create in a vacuum. One of the first things I learned at art school was to read the brief after you've done the work.
Yeah, nice.
If you read the brief before you've done the work, you're ruined. That's not the way of saying it, but you're ruined because you've lost. And in fact, I used to say to C-suite people in business, I would say, please don't tell me anything about your business. In fact, I on many occasions would be with the great and the good in the C-suite of major organizations like this, la 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 la, because they would be trying to tell me about their businesses.
Yes.
And I always say, but I'm going to lose my objectivity in a nanosecond. It's a precious thing. And so people walk into a creative workshop in a corporate, in an environment, they're walking in as that salesperson, whoever they are, the archetype that exists within that world. And they also walk in with expectations placed upon and they walk in with outcomes in mind.
And they also walk in with an ego, with a perspective of how they should behave, a perspective of what expectations are being put on them, all of which could be totally untrue. But we get ourselves in these situations, don't we, where we should, ought to, need to, must. And to be truly creative and be yourself, you've got to be open to possibility. And that's why one of the things that I love about Collaboration Global that happened not quite by accident, but it just felt right at the time, was we had a Qigong master join our community, Alessandro. And I said, would you like to just get us in the right space before we start the meeting? And at the end of the meeting, that's one of the things that everyone says, oh my God, that was amazing. It was like 2 or 3 minutes. It was a tiny amount, but it grounded us for what we wanted to expect and without expectation. This was the point. We were allowed to just sit there and go, oh, this is a bit different. This isn't a networking meeting. We don't normally do meditation when I go to this networking meeting. This is different. And already your minds are more open and susceptible to something that's a bit different. And you're not making prejudgment and going, oh, I know what this is all about. That's fine. I've got this. You can just sit there and go, oh, hello, that's a bit. So now all of a sudden you're open to what's possible. And that's what I love, is that every single meeting is different. And when people like yourself turn up, kind of out of the blue, I'd invited you, I didn't know if you were able to come. And so many people are talking about you after the meeting because your contribution had such a major impact on the people that were in the audience. The audience are as important, if not more so, than the people that are doing the presenting and the sharing. It's
yeah, and that is collaboration. That is what we learned as an institution, and that carries through everything that we do, is around what collaboration really means. It's always spoken about. Everybody say, "Oh, we collaborate." No, you don't.
Thank you. Yes, true.
Many people just don't. They use the word without knowing what it really means, and I think the same applies to that other wonderful word that's been thrown about all over the place now, which is co-creativity. And I spent the first 15 years of my career in big ad agencies as a creative and as a creative director. And I've always been sort of wondering when I sit in networking events and Zooms when people are talking about co-creativity and collaboration. And in fact, I say everybody should spend a period of their career in the creative department of an ad agency. Nowhere else. not in account management, not just in the creative department, because that is co-create. It was in the 80s when I was in it. You just co-created. I was invited a lot to lecture on creativity within client businesses and governments and charities as well. And I would always start in the same way. It became a thing, really, where I had a big bin bag, and it was all true. Had a huge bin bag, and the first thing I did was throw the contents of the bin bag out across the room, and it was always screwed up bits of paper.
Right.
And they were always genuine. I would say that I have been one of the most successful creative directors in advertising for a number of years. And these are the ideas that I had yesterday that were shit. And they were always true, because I used to get through about 20 A3 marker pads a week, and cost a fortune. Spent more on marker pads than I did food. But at the end of the day, sort of, that is the way to collaborate and to co-create. I remember one day being in with my copywriter at the time, in about 1987 or something, and we had a particular brief that we had to crack very fast, and it was for a substantial campaign, won't name the client. And we didn't really talk to each other, and I came up, in the course of maybe 2 hours, I came up with about 50 ideas, and I would draw them down in a box, add concepts. Used to call it vomiting onto the page, and I just chucked out lots of ideas. In the same time frame, he was pondering a lot, and he was looking out the window a lot, and every now and then he'd write something down. Anyway, after about 2 hours, I had about 50 ideas, and he had 3.
Right.
47 of my ideas were absolute rubbish, but 3 of them had merit, and all 3 of his ideas had merit. So we arrived at the same point, if you were to look at it like that. But we were co-creating, because we just knew we were bouncing stuff around. And my lovely strategy partner, we used to have whiteboard paint everywhere. It used to be on the walls and the ceilings, and we'd be drawing everywhere. And people would say, "Oh, you can tell when you two are getting on because it goes quiet." It's the whole time. And so this idea of co-creativity, it's there. It's just a mindset shift that's required. And as I think you said at the beginning of this, getting over our egos, getting over ourselves. But I genuinely can't remember, in a 40+ year career, exactly where the idea started. Out of all the ideas that I've had, all the things, all the strategies I've built, I can't think where the idea started. And I'll be honest, I can't even think if it was my idea. I know I started it, but I know that so many other people were catalysts for that and developed it. We have that, and that's why you have things like the overnight test. The number of times I've woken up in the morning, looked at what I did late last night, and thought, what was I thinking? That's terrible. But it's for other people to judge. I also used to a lot say to, back in my ad days, obviously our clients were mostly marketing directors, and it was in the 80s, and the firebrand creative directors still existed. And so I would have plenty of times where marketing directors would say they didn't like my idea, or the agency's idea, and I'd always say, well, I don't really give a shit what you think, because you're not the target market. Why do I care about you? Just because you are holding the purse strings for this doesn't mean we have to dance to your tune. It's and again, it's an old maxim, but it's one that I stood by for forever. Never give the client what they want, give them what they need.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that maxim. So do you think, talking about creativity, somebody said to me the other day that because of AI, everything, no, it was Grayson, wasn't it, on the call last month, everything's becoming homogenous. No, it wasn't Grayson, it was the guy before, sorry. Oh, what's his name? Greg Moyer said everything's becoming homogenized because of AI. So the cars that we drive, if you look out on any motorway, there's so many cars that are the same blooming SUV and almost the same color, and you can't tell whether it's a Jag or a Audi or a Mini, whatever. They're all kind of morphing into each other because they're created by AI. The same with architecture. He said we don't get any fantastic architecture because AI has such it's boxes on boxes with lots of glass. It's like wherever you look, this is the same thing that's coming through. Is it fashion or is it AI? So at what point do we let AI polish things up, or do they start the ball rolling? It's like, is creativity in general, the beauty of our world, the architecture of our world, the joy of our world, is that going to be lost in the music that we listen to, in the art that we look at? Where's the soul of the things that we are valuing now? In 20 years' time, what are we going to be valuing?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I don't know about cars becoming homogenized because of AI. I certainly know they become homogenized because of legislation, and also because of, isn't everything pretty much made by VW these days? You know, it's about the economies of scale, and it's about supply chains, it's about all sorts of things. But you know, when you look at AI, I was really struck recently by something that somebody put on LinkedIn, where they had put in a search into AI for imagery, and the key search word was autism, which is an area that's particularly close to us and our world. And the problem was that all the images that came back were of sort of haggard and depressed young men who were all grey and sallow and looked like they were about to kill you. And that was the definition of autism manifest through search engines and AI. And I, like many other people, was absolutely horrified. I mean, really horrified. It does not relate to our world. Those images are not right. Of course, the data that AI is built from, frankly, out of date. You know, and if in the 1960s, 70s, or whatever, if that was the view and the writing about autism, just using that as an example, but you could apply that to pretty much anything, then it's out of date. You know, and by that measure, are we to use AI to be inspired about architecture, and we end up in 1970s concrete monstrosity housing estates again? You know, where does it go? How do we use that? I remember, I can't remember the exact year, but it was in the early 1980s. And I remember the production manager at an agency that I happened to be an art director at, wandering around with his gizmo. He had a gizmo, and he was saying, "Oh, this is amazing! I've just had a thing, just had a presentation about this," and it was a mouse from a map. And everybody's going, ooh. And at the time, we were all, you know, I was an expert in how to create artwork with rotary pens and, you know, cow gum and things like that for real things. We had AO drawing boards, and suddenly this thing called the Apple came into play. And as you might know, the advertising industry was the first to adopt Apple. It was the real driver for their business in the early days. And there was a period of time where everybody was mollified by the shiny thing, as is often the case. And they were mollified by the technology, and everything became homogenized. People like me saying, no, I've learned how to do hand-rendered marker visuals with magic markers and Pantone markers and things like that. And I was determined I was still going to present on boards, and, you know, old school, but really great, in the way that creative should be presented, in my view. And for a long time, it was all homogenized, because people could. And that was in the era of certainly in my world, where, you know, people say, why should I pay you money to come up with our brand image when my 10-year-old daughter can do it on her computer? You know, so you sort of went through that phase. And then the good news in all of that was that after about maybe 10 years, I think, I'm guessing, technology kind of caught up with the creativity, or the creativity caught up with the technology, and people were able to start using it. You know, I remember the first video installation art works in galleries like Tate Modern, when they first came out. Video as art. Well, that's TV. No, it's not. It's art.
Tricky,
is that a poster, or is it a piece of art? What is that? You know, and the distinction started to get blurred. And I think that's true of creativity across the piece. So for us, you know, thinking about collaboration from a creative and truly co-creative perspective, thinking about the loss of ego. You know, I want to bring in, I've never done it, I want us to do it. I want to bring in a bunch of business leaders and a bunch of children and farmers and people into the same room. My institution has done some of these things, but I want to do something really dramatic. And I know that people like Clover Hogan, who you may know out in the world, is doing amazing things, and the youth advisory boards and things like that. But where there is a true share of thinking between people who apparently know everything and people who apparently know nothing. And I want to see what goes on and which way round it works. One of our action groups is, we have 7 of them, and one of them is pre-loved. And pre-loved is our changing assumptions action group. And that's going all over the place at the moment. It's really interesting when we start to, and again, this is all rooted in research and inside data and so on. And we have a big AI function, human-centered AI. AI being used at the moment to do things like understand the patterns between what's been going on in Afghanistan, certainly in terms of regenerative agriculture and things like that, what's going on in Guatemala, looking at things like natural and man-made disaster. So using AI to look at those things, and something that we're not involved in yet, but we will be, using AI to ensure that the last speakers of languages are remembered. So there's some work going on. It's nothing to do with us, but there's some work going on in New Zealand at the moment around the last speakers of Maori languages. Lots of archival work going on. The last living speakers of those languages, translating things from the archives. AI is heavily involved. It's really cool. I learned a couple. We're starting to. We're co-producing a film called Last Voices, which is on exactly this subject. And the people who are creating this film, I didn't know this, and please don't quote me on it, even though this is on a podcast. But my understanding is that the last speaker of a language dies every day. And it's frightening, when you think about that, you think about culture and so on. But back to desperation and creativity, isn't it amazing when here in Glasgow, we work with some people who are a fashion retail outlet, independent fashion retail outlet, but all the clothes they design and things are all designed by homeless people.
Oh, yeah.
And they get paid and they get off the streets, and it's just independent. It's just small doing its thing. In the general schema of the polycrisis, they're not making any difference at all, really, but they really are, because they're making a difference to someone's life.
Yeah.
And that's everything. That's absolutely everything.
I love those kind of stories. I mean, there's a guy currently on LinkedIn, John Pritchard, has got a company called Parlour Eyewear, and as a result of selling sunglasses, that's all he does, he sells sunglasses, but he's helped several villages in, I want to say Ghana, don't quote me on that, in Africa, where they create the cases for the sunglasses, they help to design them, they help to make them, blah blah. So, and they also are becoming businesses themselves in that. Over the last month, because the business model wasn't working, he had to let it go. He's had to close the company. And so the company was a tool to help these people in Africa. So it could have been anything, could have been selling anything, but he chose not the sunglasses. And for a good 10 years, it was okay, but it was always a struggle to get it off the ground. And he's gutted that he's had to close it. And it's like the potential of what he was going to do. And it's just, he's such an incredible person. And the fact that that had to be put to rest and it couldn't carry on, it must have broken his heart. Hopefully there's more new things coming along the way. I just want to pick up on what you said a little bit earlier, that you'd love to get people in a room that are all from all different walks of life and all different ages and things. We did a kind of mini version of that not so long ago, when we used to do the face-to-face meetings at Collaboration Global, and it was half term, and one of the guys said, I can't come when it's half term because my kids are off and I'm babysitting. I said, well, firstly, they're your children, so you're not babysitting. It's called parenting. Secondly, why don't you bring them? They're like, but it's business. And I said, it's not just business. There's more to this than just business. So he brought his kids, and everyone was invited to bring their kids. So we had an 18-month-old all the way through to 18, and everyone, our slot, up to 82 in the room. It's phenomenal. And every month we always take one of our values or our behaviors from Collaboration Global and unpick them. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? This is what it means to us. Do you resonate with it? And we have a discussion around it. So this particular month was love. So you think, well, that's not going to be a great discussion. Everyone's going to know what love means, aren't they? A 15-year-old at the back of the room, also neurodivergent, I believe, not said very much so far, but actually put his hand up. So I was like, yeah, what's the question? Kind of before we got started, before we start, could you just clarify for me if you're talking about love? And I was like, oh, bless him, he's trying to find out. He said, are we talking omnipotent from the perspective of the ethereal, or are we talking? And I'm like, nobody has ever asked me that question before. I said, that is fantastic. I mean, And it's this, it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are or what your age is, there is always something you can contribute to this conversation. And someone said to me the other day, oh, well, the 18-month-old didn't say very much. I said, no, but everyone that looked at that 18-month-old baby smiled because she was so damn cute. And it's like she brought love into the room, you know, it was amazing. And I think having people in a space where you can take the jacket off of I'm a corporate person, or I'm a CEO, or I'm a financier, or whatever it is, or I'm just a housewife, or I'm just a carer. You hear these people say about their careers, oh, I was just a carer. That's so important. That is helping people quite often to the end of their days. And they think it's just, oh, it's just a carer. So when people can take away the labels, again, that we give them, and they can come to the room and share their thoughts. And one of the 18-year-olds said to us afterwards, he said, I really like that environment. He said, I wish school was like that. I said, why do you say that? He said, well, I felt like I could say anything I liked and nobody would judge me.
Yeah, that's...
And if any place could be like that, we need that, to be able to put your hand up and say something that's so ridiculous, but nobody's going to go, what are you talking about? They're going to go, oh, I'm not really sure about that. Let's unpack that and see what it's about. Because everyone sees failure as a negative rather than a wonderful learning opportunity and learning experience. And I think the minute we can twist that around and not judge people because of their differences, but welcome them because of their inexperience or their viewpoint, their context of where they're coming from, and to help us to learn even more, that's the stepping stones that we need for any collaboration to work. If you've got a dozen people in a room and one of you's going, well, if you don't know that, it's what, no point being here. And I've been in that room, by the way. I've been in that room where somebody said, don't do that. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I felt really bad. And then the guy further up the road went, I didn't know that either. It's like, well, why didn't you people say something? It's like, it's this stress that we don't need. If you're just in a space where you can literally say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand that. Can you help me? Or I've just thought about this. Is it relevant? I'm not really sure. And have people go, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe that could be. Open kindness and love. If you start from love as your foundation, you can't go far wrong. It's our superpower. I really believe it's our superpower. And it's not in the business world per se. It is in some places, but not at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about love. I mean, you might want to bleed this out, but Institution has as one of its main things, we fucking love humanity, and we invite people to unpick those words. And so there's a lot of stuff around this, but if you love it, isn't it amazing how it's such a highly charged word? And so your comment from the person in the room, about omnipotence, that was fantastic, because when you think about it, we can think about it in relatively trivial ways, right up until we personally don't have it anymore, and then it becomes really serious. A marriage ends or something like that, and it becomes very serious, or something that we deeply love is lost to us, they die, whatever it might be. And so then it becomes visceral. But the sort of cheapness of Valentine's Day over here, and the depth of love over here. I mean, I'm wearing a love heart cardigan. I've got a love heart tattoo on my neck, and in fact that tattoo is I adore you backwards, which is my message to the world. So we can talk about that, and yet I can swear like a troop and get quite angry sometimes. At the end of the day, we are messy humans. That's that earlier point. But I think the idea of love and love lost applies. I used to come home years and years ago, and after having done workshops in corporates and things, and be asked how it went, and again, forgive me, I'd say, well, I've just spent the last 5 hours in a room full of people trying to prove he's got the biggest penis, and it's just not nice on any level. It's not. But when you look at the motivation that people have, and I remember a good friend of mine saying to me, it's why we started Age of Human actually some years ago, was around this guy who was a sales director for again major businesses, and the idea that people were actually committing suicide because they couldn't meet target. I had the chief sales director. I'm sorry, I'm not coming down on salespeople, but that's happened to. And I had the chief sales officer for a major organization. I traveled to the US to meet with these people. I had done a load of stuff. And I had the chief sales officer say to me as we were walking down a corridor in their building one day, I'm really pleased that we're using you because I want one throat to choke.
What?
Yeah. And I actually said goodbye.
Oh, good.
I turned down a significant piece of work because I'm not going to work in that kind of culture.
Awful.
I'm just, and unfortunately, there are a lot of cultures like that. And so the little people remain little.
Mm.
A 17-year-old boy that I mentioned earlier, a little person can be massive. And we get into the old quote from was it the toilet guy in NASA? When he did, and he said he's putting a man on the moon. That's an old one, but it's really important. It cuts to a lot of very important things. So love, what does that mean? Love of humanity, love of all living things. I mean, that's very much one of our things. We talk about regenerative everything, everywhere, all the time, and that's a very key part of the Undaunted, a key part of us. But what does that mean? Regenerative, suddenly you get into a semantics debate around regeneration versus sustainability, systemic versus systems, strategies, culture for breakfast, or is it the other way around? Who cares? At the end of the day, we've just got to get on and do stuff. I think that's really important. And if we can do that with love, the point about we fucking love humanity, say sometimes it's, my very lovely friend Rob will tell you that love is a decision.
Okay.
Yeah. And that has merit for me. We could again spend the rest of the day debating just that, but what is it? I also like the phrase "in the name of." What are we doing things in the name of? Who are we doing things in the name of?
Interesting.
Is it ourselves? Is it the business we work for? Is it our boss? Is it our children? Is it our it's a combination of things. We go out to work and earn a living. I remember my years of commuting into London and how dreadful that was, and remembering that I had young babies at home, and that's why I was doing it, and things like that. And you kind of we all do this. We all go through life. But what happens if we look at things through the framing and the lenses of people that haven't got anything? And haven't even got the ability to be kind to themselves, let alone anybody else? What about the people that want to be kind but are shut down every time they try to? And that, again, is very much part of what we're about. How do we unlock that? Where's that inner beauty, the inner love, the kindness and so on? So being human, hidden depths. Oh my God, we've got so much depth. It's just a shame that for many people, they're forced into a world of being superficial.
And I think that comes back down to choice, isn't it? And knowing that we all have a choice, and even not doing anything is a choice. And when you've just said love is a decision, I totally concur with that. It's apart from the chemical lust reaction in the early doors of a relationship, but everything else, and being born into a family and you think you have to love them, there's still a decision to be made. And I always talk about choice over decision. Decision, it comes from so many words that are connected to decision, like decide, suicide, infanticide. Where does it? It's like a negative choice. But if you empower yourself with choice, even by not choosing, you're making a choice. And it's like, well, this is me in control. So I choose to love you. And this is what we say in Collaboration Global, is that we don't care whether you are black or white or sky blue, pink, gay or straight or can't decide, male or female, anything in between, old or young, tall or short, blah, blah, whatever your political persuasion, religion, whatever. We don't care. We don't care how much money you've got. We don't care what you do for a living. You're a human being first. Therefore, we love you. It's a given. And because we love you, we trust you. And because we trust you, we respect you. It's up to you. If you want to lose that, it's your choice.
And isn't that brilliant? The idea that the default position is trust and love. If that's the default position, my favorite quote of all time, which I can't attribute it to anyone. I don't know who said it, but my favorite quote is, "You can always spot the moral victor because they're the ones lying on the ground with their noses broken." And I think that's brilliant. It's certainly mean for my life, and so this idea of trust, and but it's hurtful. isn't it? You know, if your default position is trust rather than distrust or mistrust, if that's your default position, the chances of getting hurt are more powerful. On the other hand, the chances of missing out on stuff are huge.
But do you know what it's like if you've got a 3 or 4-year-old running around? If you choose to trust them and you teach them about love and kindness and compassion and all of those things, they kind of live up to it. They want you to be proud of them for what they can do. And it's the same with any human being. If you give them that trust, you give them that respect, they live up to it. And, you know, I don't want to touch wood or be superstitious, but in my lifetime, I have very rarely been disappointed. And I kind of can't help myself, but I love people on site. And I have been disappointed, yes. But when I hear some people's disappointments, I think, well, I'd much rather have my style of living by loving people from the word go, and then maybe be disappointed a little bit, rather than distrust everyone on site and then have to wait for them to prove themselves before I will give my heart or share any affection. It doesn't feel natural to me. So I think love is the only way for us to go. If you look at I want to say Buckminster Fuller, he talks about ephemeralization, doesn't he? And he said that the ultimate ephemeralization is love. You can do more and more with less and less. And we have this superpower that we're connected to as part of the human race. So if you view everybody around the world, no matter what their experience and what their life choices are, so long as we are out to help each other and support each other, rather than go like the Western world, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? If we're not transactionally collaborating, but we are giving of ourselves and love in order to collaborate and pay it forward and help more people, then this has to be the way forward. This has to be the way to go. And the fact that you talk about the undaunted, it's a strength that I can feel, that is like, yes, this is the next stage. This is the next thing. This is the next capacity that we live into, because there is so much bad news out there. Let's not deal with that. Let's be undaunted and look for the good in everyone to make that difference, to see our world in a new way. So
and look for the good, look for the joy, look for the opportunities to, you know, co-creation is a word, you know, it's just being used, but the act of co-creating is amazing. I mean, we're not alone in this, but we will talk about citizen as a verb. It's something you do. It's not someone you are. It's something you do. And you know, others have said that, but we very much subscribe to that. And so this idea, love, trust, real collaboration and co-creation, empathy, building, kindness, all these other things all come into play. They're all part of the same thing. And I think that's what stops or changes the nature of something from being a word that you used just a moment ago, transactional, and into something that is interactional. You know, at what point does transaction, stories being swapped and told, become interaction? Okay, what are we going to do with that then? And that's creativity, certainly what the Undaunted and the Unheard are about. You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to learn from that learning exchange? What values can we derive from that? What contributions are we making, and what benefits can we gain? That's transaction, but it's transaction in a sort of different way somehow, because it's rooted in free expression. I've been reading a lot. I've always been a big fan of the libertines. I studied the Fluxus movements, and I charted years ago. I charted back from, I was studying conceptual thinking at art school, and I went back from my own moments in time during punk back through Fluxus and arrived back at the libertines, you know, in the sort of late 17th to 19th centuries. And in the middle of all of that, bearing in mind I was in the middle of punk at the time, I became fascinated by anarchy. And what anarchy really meant. And at the time, if we happened to be here in 1977, 78, and the Sex Pistols had just been out there and destroy and all of that, that's not punk. That's a version of punk. But if you look at what anarchy is really all about, it's a very beautiful thing. Go back to the anarchist libraries from the late 19th century. They're really beautiful thoughts and ideas, and they root back into the social contracts, Rousseau, people like that, even Marx, and you can go back in some really interesting areas. But if we make assumptions about people, we do. We make assumptions. We lose objectivity about people. The good listeners and viewers of this podcast made assumptions about me before I even started speaking. you as well. We make assumptions. Is it my role to change those or reinforce those assumptions, or is it, where does this two-way, this interactional thing happen? It's incumbent on everybody involved to play a part, one way or another. And sometimes being silent, listening, is, as we know, the most important part. I'll never have that because I'm a mouthy git who just carry on talking all the time.
Well, talking of talking too much, I've just noticed what the time is, so I'm going to, having spoken about love and interaction and being undaunted, I'm going to draw this conversation, part one, to a close for now. Steve, if people have been interested by what you're saying, want to find out about the Undaunted, want to connect with you, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Find me on LinkedIn. Find the undaunted.global on that internet, or find us on Medium. So there are a number of places you can find us, but have a look at my LinkedIn profile or www.theundaunted.global. Global,
fantastic. I didn't realize you're on Medium. I shall check that out. Yeah, I'm getting into Medium now. That's getting quite good, isn't it? And of course, if you want to see Steve, he will be speaking at some point at Collaboration Global, or you might just pop in and see him. If you come to a Collaboration Global guest session, he might be in the audience as well. You can get to have a little chat with him in one of the breakout rooms. If you fancy coming to Collaboration Global, then always the last Tuesday of the month, you can find us on Eventbrite. Just search for Collaboration Global or go to collaborationglobal.org, which is our website, and you can book on there. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for coming, Steve. I just love these conversations. I'm so excited about what the Undaunted is going to create. I'm also excited about how Collaboration Global can be part of it. I'm not really sure where we're going to fit in together, but there's a future going down the line because we are so in sync with what each other's thinking. It's very exciting. So if you've listened to this podcast, you're at the beginning of something very special. Watch this space and see what happens. Thank you again for coming.
Undaunted, it will be done.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Steve. See you soon. Take care.